Hello and welcome back to the Digital Marketing Podcast. My name is Kieran Rogers.
I'm Louise Crossley.
And I'm Daniel Rolls.
And today we are talking about ethics and AI.
Okay, let's go back a couple of months. And I had the rather, I'd say, unenviable opportunity to go to the House of Commons, the seat of UK government, and tell them whether or not they should be regulating AI.
Order!
No pressure.
Order.
Yeah, no pressure at all. In reality, what we did, we had a debate, and I was tasked with one side of the debate.
Oh.
And we had one of the other people that did debate with me, Jenny, will be coming on to the podcast very shortly. So we'll save a little bit of stuff for that. But we had on the other side someone from the Turing Institute, and which is like quite intimidating, and someone from Accenture, very, very senior Accenture. So we were arguing the point that actually AI is not what poses the biggest risk to industry, but actually it was a lack of investment in professional standards, i.e. training and education, and a lack of regulation. Now, in my mind, I was slightly conflicted in that actually I think AI poses a huge risk. I'll explain why in a moment. But we kind of we won the debate at the end of the day, but we made the point that actually this stuff's not going back in the box. Genie's not going back in the bottle. You need to manage it, regulate it, think about using it sensibly. So definitely worth doing an episode and discussing some of those challenges. But you unearthed an article, Kieran, someone from Google Brain talking about this, and I got it the wrong way around. So explain this to us, and then we'll discuss it.
So it's Andrew Ning from, he's a professor at Stanford University, and I believe he's worked in various big tech forums. We'll put a link to the article in the show notes. But he's basically arguing that big tech is very afraid of open source AI. And so they're making a case that it could, paraphrase this a little bit, like it could wipe out humanity.
So you're saying people are arguing...
They're arguing, look, this is really, really dangerous.
To try and get it regulated?
Yeah, they want it regulated because then they have a monopoly on it. So the big danger if you're Google or Microsoft or any of the big players in this space is that any fool with a laptop and a few thousand lines of code could create something that wipes out and makes all of your tech irrelevant like that. And actually, I think ChatGPT was only about 4,000 lines of code or something. I forget the actual figure, but it's not a great deal of code. And this is what some of the experts have been saying in advance of all this, is actually we don't know where the next big thrust is going to come from, because actually we've got the techniques out there now. And actually, if you can develop a large language learning model, right, and you can improve on it, actually, it's kind of like it was in the 80s with kids creating, mega hit computer games from the bedrooms. It sort of opens up that possibility with all the frameworks and stuff that you can pull.
So a couple of interesting things off the back of that then. Just announced recently the Frontier Model Forum, which is supposed to be an organization that's trying to develop regulation frameworks and safety frameworks and investing loads of money into AI safety. OpenAI, Microsoft, Google members. Notably, no Facebook or no Meta at the moment. That might well change. I mean, I'm sure that could change. But at the moment, it's those people investing in this. Now, you could talk about this from a safety point of view, regulation. You could also talk from a quite cynical kind of control of the market point of view. I'm not going to get into that particularly today. But we have got some big technology in the hands of some big companies, like we did with social media. And one of the things we're arguing in the House of Commons was actually regulation of social media earlier on could have helped. But we always have this problem that the regulators are never going to be up to speed with the technology because the technology is moving at such pace. So that's a starting point for all this, I would suggest, in that as organizations, we need to start thinking about this. And there are some challenges about it as well. I love the Stuart Russell quote.
So Stuart Russell, he's the professor of computer science at University of California. And he was quoted in The Guardian recently. Again, we'll put a link to the sources and stuff. But he said there's more regulations on sandwich shops than there are on AI companies. And that's that's not good, is it?
That's terrifying.
No, especially when we're talking about technology that has the potential to be weaponized to have far bigger impact than, say, nuclear bomb technology. And why? Because anybody could utilize it and turn it to their own ends.
Right. So let's talk about this. So there's a lot of talk about AI ending the world, cyber security risks, setting off nuclear bombs, all this kind of stuff.
But I blame the Terminator films for this.
Well, it's a logical kind of step forward, right? But actually, there was a great article in the Times today talking about the fact that actually the biggest risk is using this stuff to manipulate conversations to get extremity of opinion. Give you the point. We've got 2 wars going on at the moment, and the reality is there's lots of bots and things like that going out and saying, did you see this happened when it didn't happen?
Yeah.
And generating images that don't exist and all those kind of things. So actually, rather than it being us versus the AI and the AI trying to destroy us, we're using the AIs to destroy each other, which is...
Also, interestingly, if you say, for example, with a lot of the political stuff going on, if you ask ChatGPT for your opinion on it, but you say, speak to me as if you're the Sun newspaper or speak to me as if you're the Daily Mail, it will give 2 completely different answers.
Yeah. And there's that whole thing as well of actually going through and thinking about training data. So this is where we get into the serious stuff, right? Is that if an AI is given a set of training data, and that training data is full of fake news, biased news, all those kind of things, then it will think that's the answer. Okay. Now, a lot of this investment is going into research to try and get rid of those problems, remove bias, but humans are inherently biased in the majority of cases. Even when you've got situations where the really reputable news sources, you know, if you look at the UK, you've got the BBC, you've got the Times, you've got the Guardian, all these different places. They will all be accused of having bias by the other side very often as well. Okay. Therefore, it's very hard to say what is unbiased news, what's an unbiased opinion on these kind of things as well in many cases. Certainly for an AI to work out the subtlety of those things is quite challenging. So that training data piece becomes something we need to be aware of because we're using these models. But we don't know what they've been trained on. And I gave the example before. I know that if I ask ChatGPT about one of the models for my books, it knows about it. It shouldn't be able to do that because it's copyright. So there's some copyright issues in here. There's some issues around ethics. There's some issues around understanding.
It's read your book and it's learnt about it.
Yeah. But it shouldn't have had access to that book in the first place, technically, is the point. So, and I've got no problem with that. I mean, I think that's good. It means it's going to disseminate my stuff. Like it's okay at being in the search engines. It's the same kind of thing. Now, let's get into a couple of things. We had this conversation yesterday. We were looking at HeyGen, which is a thing that will do deepfake videos of translations, right? So you give it a video. Talk us through it, Kieran, because you use this.
So it does a whole bunch of stuff. You can get it to, like we gave it a speech from Shakespeare, and we animated like a picture of Shakespeare to read the speech. Right. It was mildly amusing. But I also gave it, one of my client videos. So I made
this
a
is the one I
video
saw.
with a client. The client was talking very knowledgeably about his subject in English, and it was well lit and nicely shot. And I asked it to translate it into Italian, and I wasn't expecting too much from it. Now, it took 3 weeks for it to get processed.
Because you've got a free account, right?
It's a free account, yes. It took 3 weeks to get this processed on the free account. So I was actually, when we were last here, I was waiting for the results to come through, and it came through about a day later, and I was blown away. Like there was my client speaking very fluent Italian. Now I don't speak Italian, so I couldn't answer to how good the Italian was, but the accent sounded.
Well, the lip sync
and the lip sync on it was superb,
and it was his voice as well.
And it was his voice, not an artist. Now I'd only given it like less than 3 minutes of video. And yet it was able to completely replicate his voice and translate that into a foreign language. That filled me with dread, because that means actually with this tool, you can't change the script. Like you can't put words into their mouth. But there's no reason why somebody couldn't develop that using the same technology. And actually I could have the most famous people in the world.
We've got hours of video view. Nothing stopped me taking that and doing it.
But we don't even need hours anymore. That's the thing. When we played around with things.
Descript originally used to need a lot of audio. Okay. Now it doesn't need as much. Things like 11 Labs can have literally 3 minutes of audio.
Not only that, what's that company gonna do with all of this data? Because they've effectively got that tool that can speak like anybody. And that opens up all sorts of ethical
Well, let me give
issues.
you a brand challenge for us at the moment. Okay. A lot of our online learning is my voice recording it. We're trying to mix it up, more diverse voices, and we use an agency. And that agency has a particular voice that we use, a lady called Nicola, who records a lot of this stuff for us. That costs quite a lot of money. We can now use 11 Labs to generate a voice. So we can say female, middle-aged voice, slightly, UK accent, maybe of this. And you design that accent and you play with all the variables and you get the voice that's just right. And you get the right level of, you don't want it too flat, but you don't want it too kind of going up and down too much. And you get it, and then that's your voice. And you can save that voice. And then you can put your text through it. And listening to it now, I can't hear the difference between now and again. I might get a little tiny something, but it's very hard to hear the difference. For a brand that prides itself on authenticity, is it okay to use AI voices to record things? Okay. Now, I asked our podcast listeners this. The answer basically that came back, and this is, we're not talking tens of thousands of answers, but we're talking kind of dozens of answers. People say, with audio, it's okay, but you shouldn't do it on video because it's not very authentic. So what they're basically saying is, if I can't tell the difference, it's fine, because you can't tell the difference with audio. With video, you used to be able to tell the difference, or you still can maybe to some extent. But this HeyGen stuff was the first time I've looked at it and gone, I couldn't tell you, even if I'm studying quite hard, that has been deepfaked. So this, we get into a really interesting, and we've been saying this for a while. What happens when you can't believe anything you hear? What happens when you can't believe anything you see? What is it acceptable to fake? What is it not acceptable to fake? And my point of this is we need to draw some lines as organisations, because the regulators will not do it in time.
So I was having this discussion with my daughter.
Okay.
I said, what if you knew something to be untrue, but when the rest of the world fact checked it, how would they fact check it? Sure, they Google it. But what if Google gave the lie answer? I'm not saying, I'm not insinuating that Google would, but like, what if the technology was turned to
source the wrong answer or the incorrect answer?
Then actually, gosh, all sorts of things could, like you were talking about social engineering there on a mass scale, with the potential to do that is there inherently within these tools, and they're regulated less than sandwich shops are.
Well, I'll give you another example as well, how this can happen so easily. Okay, so something happens, good or bad, and then I'm thinking back to something, and I'm not going to get into it, but something bad happens, and they go, these people did it.
Yeah.
And it goes, actually, and everyone just comments, they did it. And then it goes, oh, actually, no, it wasn't them. Okay. But all the news is online saying that someone did it. Then if AI is trained on that, then that's what it believes. Or everyone believes it because it's what's been said. And if some reputable news sources say it. So it's come at a very interesting time. Well, this AI stuff's happening, and we have a lot of conflict in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see how social media is actually making things worse in those situations in many cases. The 24-hour news cycle is potentially making it worse as well. So we have to have a viewpoint. And it's no longer any good to say, well, I'm going to wait for these people to tell me about it because I know they're going to get it right. Yeah. Because quite often they might not, but also you don't know what you can trust. So we have to start educating ourselves is my feeling on this.
Well,
look
at the damage the phrase, well, I heard that, can do.
Well, for years, right?
Yeah.
But this is also...
But that's just one person.
But let's go back.
But when the AI does that, like that one AI replicates itself a million times around the planet, and then it's that's the thing. I've been playing around with Bard a lot recently.
Yeah, so this is interesting. I did a study into this.
And I started playing around with it because they kept on coming out with news or more updates. They've been updating it a lot, and I just playing around with it to see what it would do. And actually, it learned about me as I was interacting with it. So in order to get it to do a certain function, I had to give it my email address. And then a few hours later, I asked it, did it know who I was? And it said, well, I know your name is Kieran because you gave me your email address earlier.
So that inference learning is interesting.
It's like, okay, that's interesting. Then I was experimenting, well, could I get it to believe something was true by giving it information and then asking it the question, see what, no, it doesn't do that. So there's definitely like some protective things there because actually that there's potential there that people en masse could, actually influence the AI by telling it lies repeatedly. If you tell it enough, would that get through? It doesn't seem to do that. But then I was trying to play around with, does it have any political bias? So I was asking it deliberately loaded questions about the Conservative Party or the Labour Party in the UK.
Yep.
And actually what I loved was, didn't matter how loaded my questions were, the answers it gave back were really well balanced and really well thought out.
Okay, that's really interesting.
And it got me to the point of thinking, do you know what? I think, just on the evidence that I was seeing now, I'd rather be ruled by AI than by politicians.
You've said this to me before.
But I would. I keep on coming back to this because actually it's way more balanced. It doesn't have these unbelievably extreme biases that can cause so much trouble. Like it does see both sides of any story.
So you heard it first here on the Digital Marketing Podcast. Kieran would rather be ruled by an AI overlord
I think so.
than any members of the existing UK political party. That says a lot about our UK political
party.
I would suggest as well.
That's more a reflection on setting the bar low.
Right, okay. So that's very interesting. A couple of things that really come out there for me then. One is this repository thing.
Yeah.
When you're using one of these AI agents, basically it's learning from the conversations and it's building up this repository.
Yeah.
How clear are you as an organisation how much of your data is then being used in the AI training? but also if you put copyright stuff in there, does that just make it available to your competitors? A lot of people are really unsure about it. Lots of platforms are now offering your private repository. You can train your AI, but no one else will be exposed to these things. So that's something to be aware of. And going, any tool we're using, how much we're giving stuff away. Because if you go, well, I want to train the tone of voice and everything that we've ever done on target internet, and then you go, oh, that's now all in the
Public domain.
And basically it means that anyone goes, write an article on X, it can just take a lot of the stuff that we've written and use that. So are we giving some competitive advantage away? Be aware of that. Also, depending on the type of tool you've got, how many of your previous conversations is it remembering? Is it using to base what you're doing now? So Jasper's got some great features where it will learn your tone of voice, it will learn facts about your organization, and you can prioritize those. But actually, the more advanced side of ChatGPT, you can do a lot of these things as well. And depending if you've got a paid account or not, the size of that memory is bigger or smaller and so on. So I think that's really important.
You've been playing around a lot with paid ChatGPT, haven't you?
Yeah, and I've got the academic version, so you get all the latest kind of things as well. And I think we're going to do an episode straight after this one, actually, all about what's changed with ChatGPT, because there is so much going on. It's worth looking at all those kind of updates. And that's going to continue at pace. So this is my real call to people with this, is there's two things we need to really be clear on. Is one, we're going to have to stay up to date with this, because from an ethical point of view, there are some challenges we might not even think about, and from a business competitive advantage point of view and so on. But also we need to set a policy, and we need to be accepting that policy will change constantly. We at least need to draw a line in the sand and say, we do this, we don't do that. We all use it for this, we don't think it's acceptable to use it for that. We will use the AI deepfake technology, but only in a situation where we tell people we've done it. Whatever it is that we've decided to do. And I think that's the line with that's difficult. So what if we record some e-learning and it needs to be updated, and Maria on our team goes, well, Daniel's not available. He's away this week. I'm just going to update that stat, and I'll just use a deepfake Daniel just to update it. I think that's fine. And I think everyone else would probably think that's fine. But do I need to tell you I've done that? Because otherwise you're not aware if that's been done to you to some extent. How much of it needs to be? What if I've not even written the script and they've got the AI deepfake me to read it out? Oh, that maybe is verging on it not being acceptable. And I think that's it, that we haven't really had the time to think through the scenarios to work out what do we think is okay and what's not. But
I guess that's where your really clear policy comes in.
Yeah, because otherwise you're kind of doing things going, oh, we did that thing, maybe we shouldn't have done. So it's that thing of educating yourself, sitting down, having a conversation about it, writing it down, and then going, actually, that needs to move.
Wasn't this a lot of the momentum behind the big walkout amongst American actors and scriptwriters?
Well, there was a huge concern about the fact that actually you wouldn't need them anymore, because the writing could be replaced, the actors could be replaced, or the voiceover artists could be replaced, and all those kind of things. And there were no strict guidelines on it. And if you think about it, if you are a Netflix or an Apple TV or any other, not kind of looking at those in particular, but saying actually the biggest cost is production, i.e. getting the actors, the talent in, and then having these huge shoots. And if I can just AI generate everything, why do I need to do all this hard kind of stuff? And you kind of get to the point where going, well, actually, maybe that's an opportunity for the artist to lease the image of themselves and the voice and all those kind of things. And you've had different people's different attitudes. Some people saying, you must not use my stuff. This is an art form, and I will deliver it as such. And other people saying, yeah, what's the license fee? If the license fee is acceptable.
But this is the big problem, isn't it? So when
Spotify for music, right?
And any business, all businesses exist to make profit, and the people in charge of those businesses have for hundreds of years done anything they can to maximize that profit. So if I provide a whole bunch of AI tools that mean one person can do the job of 50 people,
Industrial revolution.
I would deploy that, right? But when everybody does this, you hit a bit of a brick wall on this one, right? Because suddenly so many people in the economy are affected, they lose their jobs, and you end up in a situation where the customers no longer have any money to buy anything.
Well, this is interesting. Well, this is now we get into economics, right?
But that could actually crash the economy, and on a big scale, it totally could.
But Industrial Revolution, everyone said the same thing. Oh, there'll be no jobs left because no one's going to be working in the factories anymore. And all those kind of things, those jobs disappear, other jobs appear because of it. But you certainly will get that disparity between poor and rich and all those kind of things. And there's non-transferable skills is the problem.
But you've never had something that would have this, I would argue, that would have this big an impact on the number of people that are required. Look at how we are in today's world. We've all moved from largely manual jobs
Information
into
roles.
information jobs, and this stuff can do that. Like a lot of the lower level,
Well,
and
I'll give you
medium
I'll give you
level,
an
and
argument
higher
against that a
level,
little bit.
it can do that.
I'll give an argument against it. So there's some research we did at Imperial College, and the data science repository basically visualized all these different scenarios. One, the whole no one wants to do it because there's this big backlash against it. One of kind of where we are now, it's kind of rocketed and then it continues to grow, and then one where it just goes hyper. And they modeled out what percentage of jobs would be affected. And what they came to is 75% of jobs will be affected, but it's parts of the jobs.
Yeah.
It's not the entirety of the job in many cases. It looked like up to 20% of jobs could disappear, basically. And there's all sorts of stats in here, depending on the particular scenario you look at. But the problem with any of this, and they'll say this in Imperial College, is that it's a model. So the one thing is going to be wrong, right? It will be some variation of those kind of things.
It can only
as well.
work on what it knows.
Yeah, but what I'd say to you now is if you think how many jobs now have been fully replaced by AI at the moment, and I would say there's almost none at the moment,
No.
right? But
The moment we hit general intelligence level AI,
and then there's a huge difference.
Yeah,
then as
but
well.
they're arguing that it's only 2 to 5 years away potentially.
I think it's been like nuclear fusion for a while, which has been the fact it's been 30 years away for about 50 years.
Right.
And I think so. If people aren't familiar, narrow intelligence is an AI that does a thing, generates text, does images, does video. A general intelligence is a problem solving that can do all these different things.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about this is that forget the general intelligence one. It's not an AI, it's AIs, loads of them, right? Image ones, video ones, all this kind of stuff. If you start stringing them together, so the whole AI agents piece, create a task list, go off and do these different things, bring them. You're kind of doing some interesting things there and solving some problems and bringing things together as well. I think the problem with this is that everyone will have an opinion and no one knows the answer. And I think that's why this flexible policy and education thing becomes important, because we don't know which direction it's going to go in. I could speak to some of the most advanced AI people at Imperial and they'll have an opinion, but they know, the one thing they'll tell you, because they are proper academics, is they'll go for and go, but I don't know the answer. And I'll debate it and discuss it and we'll look at the evidence and we'll analyze it. But in reality, no one knows how fast or slow this move. But I wouldn't, if you'd said to me 2 years ago, you'll have AIs that can write stuff and you'll have AIs that can, and it will do it really well and you can deepfake videos, go, no, it's going to be a bit longer than that, Kieran. So the reality is that actually, if I know one thing, I'm going to be wrong. So I think we're interesting times. It's an interesting debate, right? So
It's terrifying to me.
it is a terrifying, but
here's the
it's
thing,
fascinating.
no,
I find it really exciting.
It doesn't matter whether we've got 3 years, 5 years, or 15 years. We need
Or even 50 years. We need to plan for it.
this needs to be discussed and thought out and planned, because some of the worst excesses of the scenarios, and they are excesses, are, they just beg a belief. And once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back.
So I get people, I quite often do a conference and I'll say to people, do you think AI is going to be for a force for good or for bad? And you can't say a bit of both. Okay. What's interesting, and this is a generalization, but this is definitely what I've seen, and we're probably doing thousands of people now. Older people tend to think it's going to be all right. It's going to be a good thing, whereas younger people are a lot more nervous about it. Now, I don't know if that's because they understand it more or because they see it's going to threaten their job.
Because they watch more zombie apocalypse.
Maybe that's the kind of thing, right? Whatever. So I think that the reality is there's definitely differing opinions on it as well.
Yeah.
So I think the steps from this, right?
Yeah.
You need a process and a culture of ongoing learning in your organization, because if you haven't got that, you're going to get behind. That thing I've said before, Google said people say it's not fair, we're now competing with AIs. And they said, no, you're competing with marketers that are using AIs. I.e., if you're not using this stuff, you will be at a disadvantage. So we have to have that learning culture. We have to have some sort of adoption. But we also need policies to say what we do and we don't do, and some guidance, and we need to revisit those, and we need to train our teams in them as well. One thing we've done is we've now built a load of AI questions into the digital marketing skills benchmark. So if you want to go off and benchmark yourself or benchmark your team, you can do that for free. Okay. And you'll be able to see how your skills compare against. Now, we haven't done AI as a separate category. We've built it into all the others because it's not a separate thing. It's something that is affecting everything. So I think we made a really conscious decision to do that as well.
But there is, on the toolkit, there's now an AI section.
Yeah,
so you can go and browse a load of AI tools on
those
there.
tools as well. So just search Digital Marketing Toolkit if you want the toolkit. Digital Marketing Skills Benchmark. We'll put it in the show notes as ever. So targetinternet.com/podcast. And you can benchmark yourself, benchmark your team, download some of those tools and play around with them. But we want to hear your opinions on this, because there's loads of different views on it. if I had to say, am I excited or worried about it? I'm excited about it. I'm enjoying it. I'm playing around with it. I can see the risk. What it's just making me think a little bit more about all the stuff we've been taking for granted, like social media, news, fact checking, which actually it was quite easy in social media just to go, yeah, this is right. It's from here, and actually go, wait a minute, maybe that's not right. So I think challenge everything, question everything, even more so than you would have done before. If you want to share some opinions, targetinternet.com, get in contact, and we'd love to hear from you.
Just one extra thing. Next week, we have another GA4 masterclass coming out.
Right, yeah. Good.
On the 22nd of November. So that's a half day if you're interested in that. And we'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, so targetinternet.com/GA4. Lots changing there again. They've changed the interface. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but they've changed the admin just to keep me on my toes all the time. Thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Podcast, and get in contact.
Please subscribe for more videos like this and visit targetinternet.com for more free digital marketing resources.